Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast. Spoiler alert, we don't discuss conventional, linear, boring career change here. This is the place where we talk about finding an aligned career path that feels like an extension of who you are, where you get paid for being yourself. Forget personality quizzes, soul-crushing scrolling on job sites, and breaking your brain trying to find your why. Join me and many other career changers who've changed their career holistically by first defining who they are at their core and then using this blueprint to design a fulfilling career or business. We use the mind-body-soul approach, and we take into consideration the complexity and multidimensionality of all that you are and want to represent in the world. This is where purpose-led careers are born and built. I'm your host, Vilma Oseita. Let's go. Hi, lovers and friends. How are you? Hope you're doing fabulous. Hope you haven't lost your marbles in this eclipse and retrograde season that we're in at the moment of the recording. Lots of shifts, lots of rearranging, all hopefully for the better. Now, today's a little bit of a different episode. I got the idea for this particular episode as I was chatting to the ladies inside the current Holistic Career Change Group program. They're actually nearing the end of the process. They have already identified their aligned career directions, and now they are just rolling up their sleeves and they're working out the nitty-gritty details of their transitions. They're collecting data. They're gathering evidence that this new chapter or, business idea is actually possible for them. There's something that happens when we first land on an aligned direction, and I've seen this happen so many times as I'm observing all of these beautiful career changers finding their truth, finding their alignment, is that when you find that aligned direction, or maybe you admit to yourself something that you already knew, after the initial excitement and elation and like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is it. Like, this business idea feels so good and so comfortable and so weirdly familiar. And, it would be such a dream to be paid for this. After the initial honeymoon period of those high emotions, we usually tend to then, after some time, experience a drop in the energy when the reality kicks in and we start working out all of the specific tangible details and the steps, and suddenly it all starts feeling overwhelming and unrealistic. This is when the gremlins will definitely attack us with all of the reasons why, this wouldn't work, or why this, whatever that is for you, would never be financially successful, and how we will forever be stuck in misalignment and unhappy, right? A reminder, this is just a phase, but I want you to be aware that that can happen. And when we are in the middle of that dark phase, it often feels completely unfathomable that it's possible for us to change. Maybe it's possible for others, but me, right? We start othering ourselves and we tell ourselves, listen, it's probably possible for someone else, definitely not for me. And perhaps some of you are currently living in this phase. So to get through this stage of your transition, we usually want to focus on two lines of attack. First of all, obviously, I'm like a broken record, taking action, taking intentional action, because action will help us feel the momentum, will help us see the progress, and it will allow us to crystallize what's working and what's not working. And then we will get more clarity on how to pivot or how to move forward. If we don't move, we won't get that information. And also, on the other hand, strengthening our belief. So that's belief work, that's thought work, belief in our aligned idea, in our capability to transition successfully, and also our capacity to do the work. Because especially when we opt for the gradual transition, there will be a short period of time where we will have to do a lot, right? Especially if we're choosing to keep our day jobs. And on top of that, like working on the beliefs and the thoughts, we also want to be collecting proof that it's possible, because our brain runs on historical data. If this career, if this business is something we haven't done before, the brain will tell us it's not possible. So the way that we counteract that is start looking for and finding those tangible undeniable examples of proof that this business, this transition can be done. And not only can it be done, it can be successful. And for that, we want to rely on those who walked before us, or at least they are at least one step ahead of us. So very often I will recommend career changers, especially in this phase, to start collecting, become essentially a collector of successful transition stories. And ideally you want to look for those stories in your new industry, whatever direction you're going into. But also you can just look at the general stories, especially those who completely turn their careers around later in life, because I feel like age is a lot of the times that one circumstance that we really like to use against ourselves, whether we're too young or too old or whatever it is we tell ourselves, is really very relative. And so this is exactly essentially what I wanted to dedicate this episode to. And I've done the work for you, and I've collected some stories of successful career changers, or people who essentially only blew up later in their lives, and they're from different periods of time. I try to focus on women, but we'll have a couple of men as well. And I would love to share those examples, those stories for inspiration with you. Also, just a reminder, especially if you're new to this podcast, you can also check out the Career Changer series, which is a series that I have within this podcast, where I also interview my clients who've gone through the career change process, and they're sharing the behind the scenes. There's usually a lot of wisdom, but above all, I think you listening to their stories will really allow you to feel less alone. It's there's a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of similarities in the change process. And I feel especially when we're moving towards alignment, we talked about it so many times on this podcast, other people may not fully understand it. So hearing someone else who walked before you and who've done the work, and they're sharing what it feels like and felt like, I really feel it's such a healing experience. However, we also want to lean on those really famous people, perhaps, who've gone through the journey, who didn't give up. There's a lot of, there's an element, as I was doing the research for the podcast, there's an element of perseverance in these stories as well. So let's do this. Let me share a couple of my favorite career change stories. So the first one is, again, I tried to choose really familiar household names that no matter where you're from in the world, you should be familiar with. So the first one is Vera Wang. And she went from actually being a figure skater to a journalist and publisher, and only then a fashion designer. And I know a lot of us, especially women, we know her as a fashion designer, especially when it comes to her bridal wear, right? But Vera Wang, is a woman who didn't design her first dress until she was 40 years old. And then after that, she went on to build one of the most recognizable luxury brands in the world. And I want to share the story with you. So imagine this, you're 40 years old. You spend, not that it's old, it's not old at all, but I'm just saying, sometimes when we're in 30s, right, we say oh my goodness, it's too late for me. But imagine you're 40 years old, you've spent your entire career in fashion industry, but perhaps always on the editorial side, and you've never designed a single piece of clothing, and you've never run a business, and yet you decide to launch a bridal wear company that will go on to dress celebrities and create ready-to-wear collections and eventually expand into $1 billion global enterprise. That's exactly what Vera did. I appreciate that ambition. So let's go back to the beginning. Vera was born in 1949 to Chinese immigrants in New York City. And her first passion wasn't fashion at all. It was figure skating. So she began skating, I think, when she was really young, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And she even competed in 1970s in the US figure skating championships. However, when she failed to make the US Olympic team, she experienced her first major career pivot. She realized there's probably not a lot of future for her. So after graduating from college with a degree in art history, that's what she chose, she landed her first job at Vogue magazine. Not too shabby. And by the way, this wasn't just any position. Within a year, she became one of the youngest fashion editors in Vogue's history, and she was just 23. And essentially for the next almost 2 decades, for the next 17 years, she immersed herself in the world of publishing, and she really practiced developing a keen eye for trends and style. And, she was essentially working alongside the fashion industry giants, right? And when she turned 38, another opportunity showed up. Ralph Lauren offered her a position as a design director, which is the different side of the fashion industry. And despite of the fears of what people were telling her, she took the leap and she shifted from editorial to design. And it was essentially her first step towards creating fashion rather than just curating it or writing about it. But the true turning point came when she was preparing for her own wedding at the age 40, and she found herself being extremely frustrated by very limited options for what she would refer to as like more sophisticated bridal wear. And so what she ended up doing, she sketched her own design. She hired a dressmaker, and they ended up creating her dress. And then this experience actually sparked an idea that maybe there are more women like her who felt the same way. So what she did, she went along and she got a $4 million loan from, I think, her family, her father. And she opened up her first bridal boutique in New York City in 1990. Okay. And you can probably imagine, especially back in the day, 1990s, 4 million is a lot of money. And this was a massive risk. And at 40, she was starting from scratch in a completely new role as a designer and a business owner, something she had never done before, neither designing nor owning a business. And she had no formal design training. And the bridal industry was completely dominated back then by really established names. And she was investing millions of dollars in essentially an unproven concept. Imagine the balls it takes to do that. Hi, beautiful humans. I'm going to quickly interrupt our regular programming for something I'm so genuinely excited to share with you. You know those moments when you're recording a podcast about aligning with your authentic design and suddenly you realize you should probably tell your listeners about the program that you've created that does exactly that. Yes, this is one of those moments. So if what we're discussing today is resonating with you, and if you're nodding along thinking, yes, I need this kind of guidance for my career transition too, I've created something special. The Holistic Career Change Group Program is officially opening its doors again, and I'd love for you to be part of it. It's an all-in-one, one-stop shop, 5-month career change bootcamp where I've thought of everything for you. I've packed nearly a decade of my experience working with career changers and structured it all into bite-sized, easy-to-implement steps, from dealing with imposter syndrome to getting clarity on your most aligned career path to creating a practical transition plan that takes care of your financial well-being. The program will combine really powerful one-on-one coaching sessions where we will dive deep into your specific challenges with a supportive group element where you connect with your like-minded sisters who will be changing careers alongside you. And you will develop clarity around your unique gifts. You'll learn to navigate transitions with confidence instead of fear, and you'll create a strategic action plan that honors your energetic design. I really wish this existed when I was changing my career. And like traditional career coaching, we will address both the practical aspects and the energetic, spiritual, and emotional components that most programs overlook when it comes to career change. So if you're feeling called to explore this path, I've created a waiting list so you can join right now and be the first one to learn about the program details. All you need to do is scroll down, find the show notes, and click on the link where you'll be able to join the waiting list and get all the juicy details. Okay, the announcement is over. Now let's get back to our episode. I promise it's worth the wait. And hey, if human design has taught me anything, it's that manifestors need to inform, projectors need to be invited, and podcasters, we just need to interrupt. However, what Vera did have, which is extremely valuable, which is something you may be overlooking and perhaps I have overlooked and many of us tend to overlook, is she had decades of experience observing what worked and what didn't work in her circumstances in fashion. For you, it may be a different industry, right? And so what she brought is actually a fresh and a modern perspective to an industry that had remained largely unchanged for years. Like the bridal, I know that there's bridal trends, right? But back in the day, they really weren't an industry that was changing, fast. There were certain canons that a lot of brides wanted to adhere to. There are a lot of sort of ceremonial, ritualistic ways and traditions and customs in which brides wanted to show up. So Vera's designs were different. They were sophisticated, they were elegant, and they had a hint of an edge, right? And it offers something different from the, traditional princessy style gowns that were dominating the market back then. And that's why, I always say to career changers as well, the fact that you don't have direct experience in a specific field that you're moving into is not actually a disadvantage. It could be a massive advantage for you because you have a fresh take. You're not inundated and programmed by the canons and norms in this industry. So if you're telling yourself like, oh my goodness, how can I transition into becoming a therapist? I have no experience. You know what? Like your fresh take, your experience could be exactly the thing that will allow you to introduce a new angle, create a new modality, perhaps. That is a massive bonus for you. So for Vera in this case, the gamble paid off, and within a few years, her designs were being worn by Olympic figure skaters, Hollywood celebrities, high society brides, and her business essentially expanded beyond bridal to include ready-to-wear, fragrances, jewelry, home products, and she even started creating more affordable lines for department stores. And today, Vera Wang, as we know her, she's a household name and her company is valued at over $1 billion. And again, a reminder, she didn't even start thinking of designing until she was 40. I feel like her story really is powerful because it teaches us a few really great lessons that we can use in life, but especially when it comes to transitions and career change. First, like I already said, your previous careers are never wasted. It's never wasted time, never wasted effort. So for instance, for Vera, her years as a figure skater taught her discipline and taught her pursuit of perfection. And then her time at Vogue gave her almost an encyclopedic knowledge of fashion history and trends, access to trends. And then her brief little stint at Ralph Lauren provided insight into the design process. And all of these experiences together, they contributed, they stacked up, and they allowed her to create this unique vision, right? So ask yourself, how could this be true for you as well? Are you using your experience in maybe one industry, one field, one role against yourself? Secondly, what I think would be important to extract here is that sometimes your greatest frustration can lead to your greatest opportunity. And again, I see that a lot with business ideas. So if Vera had found the perfect wedding dress back then when she was 40 off a rack, she might have never considered designing her own wedding dress and she would not have built this $1 billion company. Okay. She was solving the problem that she had. Again, you want to ask yourself, what problem, what issues, what gaps in the market am I being frustrated by? I told this story so many times. I'm already sick of hearing myself talk about it. But the reason why my approach is holistic and is different from your general conventional career coaching is because I didn't find this approach in the market and I wanted to have it, right? And then lastly, again, a reminder when we look at Vera Wang's stories, it's never too late to learn new skills. At 40, she was a fashion editorial expert, but not a designer. So she had to learn the technical aspects of design, the manufacturing, the distribution, running the business, all while launching her new brand and promoting herself and her clothing. And again, finally, bringing a fresh perspective to an established industry can be revolutionary. I really sense that people who are drawn to this podcast and this energy are very much the change makers, the leaders in their respective industries. right? So your fresh perspective and your new take is very needed. Yeah, so I feel like this is such a beautiful story when it comes to fashion industry, but it can be applicable, the lessons can be applicable to all of us, to any industries, is that it really is never too late to use your skills, your experience, your ideas, and create something absolutely extraordinary if you believe in yourself, if you take that risk. So that's Vera. Another fearless career changer that I just couldn't ignore in this episode that I really wanted to mention about is obviously the one and only Martha Stewart. You can love her, you can hate her, but you can't ignore her. We can agree with that. I am not American, but I am very familiar with Martha Stewart. She's not even a household name. I think she's like internationally known at this point. I also think there was a recent, was it Netflix documentary about Martha Stewart? So maybe some of you have seen the documentary, so you know the story. I watched the documentary. I wasn't familiar with her story, but I'm sure there are some of you in the audience who hasn't seen it. So it would be really interesting for us to review her story because she is very inspirational. Again, you can like or dislike her character, but what she's achieved is nothing short of spectacular. And what's really interesting, again, that's something I didn't know before, is that before she was this domestic goddess with the media empire and before all the magazines and TV shows and the product lines, she was actually a Wall Street stockbroker in a very male-dominated industry back in the day where, especially in Wall Street, women were not welcome, right? And her path, from financial markets to the kitchen and the garden really, for me, represents one of the most successful career pivots probably in, American business history or just the world business history in general. So Martha was born in the 40s, I think to Polish-American parents. I think she was from New Jersey. And at first, her career actually began as a model when she was 15. And she was really striking looking, beautiful girl. And she landed her gigs with Chanel and she had appearances in television commercials too. In its own right, she was a pretty successful model as well. And, the work she used, like for all of the money that she received, she actually paid her way through the college where she was studying history and architectural history, which is also an interesting choice. And after college, Martha continued modeling, but soon she decided to make her first pivot where she understood that looks were not forever. She has a great head on her shoulders, and she decided to go for Wall Street. And it was 1970, so I think 1968. Martha became a stockbroker at a firm, Monis, Williams, and Seidel. And this was the era, again, I just want to emphasize how difficult 1970s was, especially like the financial industry and especially the Wall Street. And that was the era of like 3 martini lunches and really rampant sexism long before Me Too or any sort of, resemblance of gender equality in many corporate settings, and again, in particular in finance and in particular in investments, right, in stockbroking. So while she was working full-time on Wall Street, Martha and her husband actually started restoring a farmhouse that they bought in Connecticut. It was a really old farmhouse. And it was here, I feel like, that the seeds for her next career were essentially planted, because when they got the property, she wanted to do it all herself. She had great work ethics. Again, her father used to be a great gardener. So she taught herself how to gourmet cook. She studied gardening books, and she immersed herself in these, domestic arts that would make her famous. But back then when she started, it all started as a hobby. She just followed her passion. She just followed her interest, even though it felt really misaligned with her role in Wall Street. Again, that is something I think like a beautiful nugget for all of us to take away, is like those little seedlings, those little interests that we have, they are not accidental. They are not random. They, a lot of the times, are mini North Stars pointing us towards certain directions. So At 35, actually, Martha decided to make her pivotal career change when she was sick of Wall Street. She had made quite a lot of money and she left it all behind and she started a catering business from the basement of her Connecticut home. So it was really humble beginnings, you would say. And it was a very, very brave move given the prestige and the income that she had while working in Wall Street, right? And she called the business Martha Stewart Inc. Simple. And she literally had no formal culinary training. And she did, the only thing she did have is obsessive attention to detail. And apparently you can monetize that. Attention to detail and relentless work ethics. That was she had. So she quickly started earning her reputation for impeccable food and presentation among like the local wealthy residents in Westport. And one of her catering clients actually owned a publishing company, and she noticed Martha and she noticed her talents, and she noticed what a high standard she had for herself. And this connection then led to her first book, Entertaining. It was published in 1982 when Martha was 41. Again, not a spring chicken. And the book, for some reason, it was again a little bit of a new take on homemaking, elevated homemaking, and it was an immediate hit. And it then positioned Martha not just as a caterer, but as an authority on elegant home entertaining, right? But as it turned out, Martha was just getting started, and she was endlessly ambitious, again, which is something I really admire. And throughout her 30s, she published more best-selling books. She became a regular in TV shows. She started developing newspaper columns. She started establishing herself as an authority in this field. And by 50, she launched Martha Stewart Living, a magazine, and her own TV show, right? And each venture that she built was built on the last one, creating what would then become eventually the Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia. So she built an empire. And what's interesting is what made her career pivot so successful wasn't, again, just her talent for cooking or decorating. It was also her business acumen that she developed during those years on Wall Street. So again, we're starting to see the same theme. Each experience is building upon the other. In each experience, we're getting a little puzzle piece, a little nugget that we can then use moving forward in the next career step. So again, your experience, your years are not wasted. Right. And what I think another reason why Martha becomes so successful is because she really understood branding before the quote unquote like personal branding was a buzzword that we all use today. She knew how to build this cohesive story and cohesive media company, and she recognized her own value in the way that few women, especially in her generation, did. She was like, I'm the shit, and let me show you how and why. And in late 1990s, I think she was around 60, she took her company public. Again, at 60, I think she was 58. She took her company public and she became America's first self-made female billionaire when the stock price tripled on the first day of trading. Again, an amazing success, right? A story for the books. And she had successfully transported herself from model to stockbroker, to caterer, to media mogul, and lifestyle guru. If she's not a queen of reinvention, I don't know who is. It really is inspiring. And again, you could say, well, she was lucky. She came from money. Well, she didn't come from money, but she had earned a lot of money, and her husband obviously was well off, right? But it was really her relentless belief in herself and her having a vision and pushing it forward and letting others know what it should look like and what the standards are. And again, she is not known to be like necessarily very pleasant to work with because she's extremely demanding and has high standards. You can, again, agree or disagree with that, right? But at the end of the day, it wasn't that someone gave this to her. She would get an idea, go full on, take a lot of action, try things out. And from there, the next step would appear, and the next step would appear, and the next opportunity would appear, right? So again, the message here is also something that I keep on reinforcing in my content is that once we have a direction, we need to start taking action, and each action will bring us more clarity and will help us understand what the next step is, right? Again, when we talk about Martha, I guess we can't really skip a well-known setback that she had because in 2004, she served 5 months in federal prison for lying about a stock sale that her portfolio manager was involved with. And many thought that this would end her career. Actually, when I was watching the documentary and I looked at, saw that particular part when she was in jail, I was thinking how I would feel. And I really think listen, I'm 60, I'm in jail, had a great life. I guess that's it. I guess that's where my story ends. I think I don't know, but I assume that I would feel extremely defeated, not Martha. What she did, she staged one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history again, and she rebuilt her brand and expanded it into new markets. And today she's over 80, I think, at this point, and she's still very actively involved in her company because she loves what she does. That's her passion. That's her purpose. She still launches new products and even embraces really unexpected collabs like Snoop Dogg, and all the others that have introduced her to new generations. So she's also a very smart businesswoman. And I really think Martha Stewart's career journey can offer so many powerful insights for anyone who's considering a professional change, because first, again, she leveraged skills from one career to excel into another. Her finance background made her a savvy businesswoman, and helped her build a lifestyle empire. Second, she followed her genuine passion, like I said, and turned what many considered quote unquote women's work into $1 billion business. So this is a proof that, again, I always talk about here, once you follow alignment, once you follow your interests, you will find abundance too. They go hand in hand, even in spaces where you haven't seen abundance before. And thirdly, she wasn't afraid to start over in her mid-30s and then 40s and 50s and then 60s, even when she was in jail. Again, proving that it's never too late to pursue what you believe in, what feels important to you. And what I love about her story is that she built her second career really gradually, and she started with a very small catering business before she expanded then into books, magazines, television product lines, right? She didn't quit Wall Street to immediately, launch a media company. She evolved step by step, and she was building on each success little by little. And we call it now the gradual transition, no jumping off the cliff, not taking too much risk, but really just being strategic and calculated when pursuing your alignment. And her willingness to completely reinvent herself, combined with her, again, attention to detail, created a career path that couldn't have been mapped out ever from the very beginning, but makes perfect sense when we look at it in retrospect, which, again, I found to be true for so many career changers. Probably even yourself. So that's a beautiful story. That's one of my favorites. Another late bloomer that I thought would be interesting to include is one of my favorite actors ever. The intense, commanding actor who seems to be in everything from Marvel blockbusters to indie movies and cult classics. The man who essentially elevated swearing to an art form. Yes, Samuel L. Jackson. But what's really interesting is Samuel L. Jackson didn't become the Samuel that we know now until he was 46 years old. That's right. He's right now one of the Hollywood's most recognizable faces and probably one of the most highest grossing stars. But he was a struggling actor and well into his 40s. So it all began. He actually initially didn't even study acting. He actually studied marine biology in college. I was just thinking about that. Imagine that alternate universe where he's like tagging sharks instead of dropping these iconic monologues, which just really made me laugh. And only a little bit later, when he was studying, he switched to acting and joined a local theater group. So it's not necessarily a career change story, but it is a story of perseverance. I feel like that's why I wanted to include and talk about Samuel L. Jackson. Actually, I didn't know all the details about the way that he became who he is today. And unlike many, overnight success stories, his path to big screen was really just a very long, tiring marathon and definitely not a sprint. Throughout his 20s and 30s, he was really just grinding it out in theater. He was taking small TV roles. And while he was fighting for roles, he, by the way, was also fighting a lot of personal demons too. Because he struggled with a lot of addictions, from alcohol to crack cocaine, and he would show up sometimes even to performances high. He would forget the lines or pass out in bars, and he had OD'd several times as well. But somehow he kept performing, he kept auditioning, and he kept pushing forward. And things started to change only when his family finally were really fed up and concerned for him, and they orchestrated an intervention and they checked him into rehab. That was when he was 43 years old, right? And what's like wildly magical and synchronistic, which again, I don't believe in accidents, it all happens for a reason, is that he had been cast in Spike Lee's film Jungle Fever just before he entered the rehab. And those of you who've seen Jungle Fever, you know that that role was of a crack addict. And when he got out of treatment, he went straight to the set and he channeled his own lived embodied experiences into the performance, which was so powerful, so impactful that the Cannes Film Festival created a new award, a special award, the supporting actor, for him. That award was created for Samuel L. Jackson. And that award didn't exist before and hasn't been giving out since. That was literally just for him in that movie. But even after this breakthrough, he still wasn't that famous. And that only changed in 1994 when back then, a very young director named Quentin Tarantino handed him the script for Pulp Fiction. And Tarantino had written the role specifically for Samuel because he had seen him audition before. And we all know what happened next. Jackson, at 46 years old, he delivered probably one of the most iconic performances in modern cinema, and Pulp Fiction earned him an Academy Award nomination and essentially launched him into the stratosphere of Hollywood star power, and the rest is history. And since then, he appeared in over 150 films. Again, he's one of the highest grossing actors of all time, and his films brought in like nearly 30 billion worldwide. So he's become a cultural icon in his own right, but all after the age of 46, when he was nearly 50. And so, again, this story isn't just inspiring because he found success later in life, is that he had to conquer himself before he could conquer Hollywood. And I feel like that's really inspiring. So many of us would have given up. And he had to face a lot of failure, hear a lot of no's, deal with a lot of rejection and addiction and his own demons. And he had to essentially bottom out before he could rise up. And so many have not risen up from those dark places. And again, like I said, the reason why I love this story, because it's a story of perseverance and not giving up and continuing to take even though tiny steps, but one tiny step forward after another, like still going to the auditions when you get no, getting high, still showing up, even if you're late, right? Like pushing forward. So for any of you thinking that it's too late to change careers or chase dreams, consider this. Samuel L. Jackson had decades of struggle. Essentially, most of his adult life, he lived in struggle. And he had life-threatening addiction and was in nearly 50 when he broke through. And this is just a reminder for all of us that the clock is not running out. There's no expiration date on talent, no timeline for when your big break and success might come. You just need to continue showing up. And I feel like that's such a beautiful reminder. Okay, another story that I absolutely love is of this beautiful, inspiring lady. She's now known for her style and independence. And again, she is a little bit of a symbol of reinvention, which is Diane von Furstenberg. And you may know her as the creator, inventor of the iconic wrap dress. But you might not know is that her journey really wasn't linear at all. And she didn't start as a designer. She had to rebuild her career many, many times. And yeah, she was also essentially a foreigner trying to make it in the US. So she was born in Belgium, but again, she really didn't start out in fashion. She actually studied economics, and in her early 20s, she married this German prince, which made her turn her into European royalty. But instead of just living this really comfortable, quiet, luxurious life, she chose to not do that, which again was very rare and bold and courageous back in the day for women. And she chose to forge her own path. So she moved to New York and she started designing clothes in early 70s. And then when in 74, she introduced the wrap dress, that became a revolution in the world of fashion. It just became this revolutionary design that gave women the perfect blend of style and comfort, right? And that dress, we all know it. Our moms had it. Probably, maybe you even have it in your closet. This became like a global sensation, and it sold millions, and turned Diane into a very, very well-known designer. But success didn't last forever, because by early 1980s, essentially in 6 years, the fashion industry was changing, and the wrap dress, which was once a symbol of this glamour and effortlessness and comfort, it was essentially becoming less and less popular. And what was rising in the industry was really more structured suits, and just demand for these feminine designs really just dwindled. And she was forced to essentially step away from the US fashion market. Long story short, but that's what happened. And because she was looking for a fresh start, she decided to move to Paris, and she shifted her focus to publishing, and she then founded a French language publishing house. But despite all of her efforts, it really didn't bring her the same success as fashion had. And at the same time, she was also navigating personal challenges, including her divorce. And again, I was kind of reading about it, and I was like, well, listen, two businesses essentially are falling apart. One fell apart. The other one is not successful. You're going through a divorce. And for many, this might have been the end of career, end of, that identity that she loved and was familiar with. But that didn't stop Diane from reinventing herself. And in the late 1990s, at the age 50, again, I want to emphasize, she saw an opportunity to essentially come back and reclaim her place in fashion, because the vintage wrap dress from the 70s were making a comeback, as the designs do. As we know, there is a lot of cyclical patterns in fashion. So it made a comeback amongst sort of younger women discovering those dresses in thrift stores. And so she sensed a revival again. So she trusts her gut, even though a lot of advisors were advising against coming back. She decided to relaunch her brand, and she decided to bring back the wrap dress, but with a fresh new energy. And this time she didn't just sell a product, she was selling a philosophy. So again, she was a really great marketer. She's selling a philosophy of confidence, of independence, and timeless elegance. So her comeback was a massive success. She completely rebuilt her fashion empire, and she now at this point cemented herself as an industry icon. And so today she's not just a designer, she's also a mentor, she's an author, she's a huge advocate for women's empowerment, and she has proven that all and any setbacks are just stepping stones for reinvention. And that success really can happen at any stage of life if you allow it to, if you are open, right? It really goes back to our mindset. There are so many points in Diane's life and her personal and professional story where her mindset, her thoughts, her limiting beliefs would have told it, well, that's it. That's where we, collect our toys from the sandbox and we move on with our life. Like there's no success for us. I need to settle for a smaller life. I shouldn't be dreaming as much. Again, a lot of advisors against her, against coming back to fashion and rebranding her brand, but she followed her instincts, right? And that's such a beautiful story of that. And I want to finish with another really cool story on probably the most iconic late bloomer success story, at least when it comes to business history. And I'm talking about KFC. We all know it. Again, whether you like the brand or don't like the brand is a completely different question. But when you see that smiling, white-suited gentleman on a KFC bucket, you're looking at someone who didn't even start his famous business until he was 65 years old. Imagine this. Imagine. You're 65 years old. You've worked dozens of jobs throughout your life. You've been a farmhand, insurance salesman, a boat operator, a tire salesman, gas station operator, and, a motel and restaurant owner. But now your restaurant is going out of business because, again, there's highways that are being built, especially back day, right? And it will divert the traffic away from your location. And most people would see this as the end of the road as well. They'd be like, okay, I had a decent life. It's time to retire. It's time to give up. It's time to settle for less and just relax. But not Harlan Sanders. So Sanders, he was born in 1890 in Indiana. And very early on, as it would happen back in the day, he had to grow up really early and really quickly. And after his father died, he started working for his family, and at 13, he had to drop out of school, and he left home. And throughout his teens and 20s, he had to bounce between jobs to survive, from working on railroads to farm and working with the blacksmiths, is like whatever he could find, right? And in his 30s, he ran even a ferry boat company. He sold insurance, he sold tires, like whatever it took, right? And it wasn't really until his 40s that he began operating a service station in Kentucky, in Corbin, where he would cook meals for passing by travelers, and he was serving them his own, dining table in the living quarters attached to the station. But his food actually quickly became so popular that he eventually opened up Sanders Cafe. It was like a proper restaurant across the street. And it was here that he had a chance to perfect his very secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices and his pressure cooking method that we know now that made his fried chicken very delicious and very quick to prepare. So the best of both worlds. And so this is where things get interesting. So in 1955, when he was 65, like I already said, the new interstate bypassed Corbin, Kentucky, and his restaurant business very quickly dried up, and he had to sell the property to pay his debts, essentially. But instead of retiring on his, whatever that was, social security check that went like $100 or something, he decided to hit the road. And he was armed with his pressure cooker, with his secret recipe, and a vision. He traveled from restaurant to restaurant across the country, cooking his chicken for restaurant owners and their employees. And if they liked the chicken, he would negotiate a deal. He would say the restaurant could sell his chicken, and he would receive a nickel for each piece sold. So it was essentially the beginning of franchising, right? It was franchising before franchising was cool. And also, mind you, back in the day, that was a very new model. So a lot of people thought he was crazy for even attempting or doing something like that, right? Usually people would open up the restaurant and would serve their food. This thing wasn't really a thing back then. So picture this 65-year-old man dressed in white suit and black string tie, sleeping in the back of his car because he couldn't afford motels, cooking chicken in restaurants across the country, facing rejection after rejection. By his account, because he kept track, he apparently, allegedly, according to him, he was rejected 1,009 times before he got his first yes. Let that sink in. 1,009 times he heard, "No, old man, you're crazy." Most of us would probably give up after a dozen of rejections. Probably even less, maybe just 2. And we're like, okay, that's a bad idea. That's a sign the universe is telling me I shouldn't pursue that. let alone 1,000. But Sanders, he just persisted. And slowly his Kentucky Fried Chicken began to catch on. And by 1964, when he was around 75, he had over 600 franchise outlets in the US and Canada. And that's when he sold the company for $2 million, which is around almost $20 million today. However, he remained the brand symbol and ambassador until his death. So this story just blows my mind, and I feel like it teaches us really powerful lessons. First of all, it's never too late to start something new. So whatever you're telling yourself, again, stop it. And at an age when most people are settling into retirement, Sanders, he was just beginning his most significant business venture. Secondly, again, your past experiences, even failures, especially failures, are very valuable because he took his cooking skills, his recipe, and his understanding of travelers' needs from the decades of previous work, and he used them to create something new. And finally, and most importantly, persistence, determination always pays off. Those 1,009 rejections would have stopped most people, but not him. And finally, authenticity matters. Because Sanders wasn't trying to be something he was not. And his distinctive appearance, his personality, that became part of his brand's appeal. And that was why he eventually became successful, because he never betrayed himself. He never changed who he was, right? He never changed the way that he was going about the business. And when I was searching for these stories for the episode, again, I found so many other similar and interesting stories to these. And then there are also thousands, hundreds of thousands more stories like these ones that are not even documented because these people didn't become as famous. Or simply maybe people like you and me making a change, like saying no to misalignment, speaking our truth, living from our hearts. Is it easy? Hell no. All of these stories, like we look back and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so inspiring. These are just lifetimes of perseverance and motivation and deciding that your idea is valid and going for it. Like Vera Wang did when she invested all this money in a concept that had no equivalence. There was no reference point to even check what the, business projections would be because she completely made it up. Or Colonel Sanders, who was like, no matter how many times you'll say no, I'm going to find people who will start appreciating this recipe. That's how much I believe in this recipe. This recipe is revolutionary, right? So many times he could have just said, you know what? F it. After like 500th no, he would be like, F it. Take it. Give me like a couple of thousands of dollars and that's it. I'm done. I'm tired. He didn't, right? So my wish for you is for you to become the next story that maybe in hundreds of years from now, the future generations will quote and refer to as an example of what's possible in the way that we're looking at these stories and we admire them. I hope that is you. I really sincerely do. And when you need a little bit of inspiration, if you're going through a career change journey right now, do a little bit of Googling, and I'm sure you'll find people in your industry, in your business niche, wherever you're moving into, you'll find those people who were very successful career changers that will become that lighthouse, that inspiration in those moments when you are doubting yourself and all of your gremlins are onto you and they're telling you that there's no way that you'll ever be successful or it will ever work out. I always say that to my clients. The only way that this will not work out is if you stop trying and if you quit. If you don't quit, you will be successful. Okay. And if you wish, or if you're looking for a little bit of push, or if you still feel like you don't have enough clarity which direction is aligned, please check out the Holistic Career Change Group program. We're starting on May 1st on the Shabbat. And this is going to be the new cohort, the spring cohort of the group of like-minded ladies who are changing career side alongside you. We have the process A to Z all laid out for you. Is bite-sized pieces, it's easy to follow, and it's literally everything that you'll ever need for a successful career change process. So if that is the support that you're looking for, make sure that you check out the details, the link in the show notes. Have a magical week. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoy this content, please make sure you subscribe to this podcast and leave a quick review to help us share the message of aligned work with the world. And if you'd like to learn more about how to find and transition into your very own purpose-led career or business that feels like getting paid for being yourself, make sure you check out the episode notes below. Have a wonderful week.